According to the EDI action in CIHR, in order to, quote, mitigate barriers faced by underrepresented groups, the first-class average, or A-plus, eligibility criterion was removed from Canada Graduate Scholarships, the doctoral program. So how is this lowering of standards increasing research excellence?
I'm seeing here there's a research project for the text complexity of German children's books for $75,000. I just want to see, how does that give value for taxpayers in Canada when we're facing a inflation crisis, a cost of living crisis, a border crisis, money that could be redirected to, how do we explain to Canadian taxpayers that that is money well spent?
Well, this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
The committee is meeting to study the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada. With that, we will now go to our round of questioning. For the first round, I will start with Mr. Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. Excuse me for that. I'm going to begin by going with Dr. Hewitt from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Recently, we had Dr. Sad appear before this committee, Gad Sad, and he said this during his testimony. There has been an autocorrection of all this diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff in the United States. I see no autocorrection taking place in Canada. If anything, I see the doubling down of all this parasitic nonsense in Canada. Science is fully meritocratic, is a fully meritocratic thing. Nobody gives a darn or damn about your identity markers. The best people should be doing the best science, period. So would you agree with that statement or not?
I would agree with the last part of the statement. I also believe, if you'll allow me to say, that we believe that diversity brings all viewpoints to the table, which is useful for the advancement of science. And if those viewpoints are excluded, you're not going to get the best science.
And that's some of the comments that we've heard, too, talk about and touch upon things such as viewpoint diversity. And in your comments, you talked about excellence is not static, and the notion of applying that to all the merit review categories and how that is all taken place. Now, are the qualifications for that, in a sense, limiting by having some of these criteria in place that some viewpoint diversity may be excluded?
I would argue no, that in fact, we see better representation as a result of guidelines that we put in place. At the end of the day, nobody gets funded because they are a member of a particular group or identify with a particular group. They get funded on the basis of the excellence of their proposal as judged by a set of criteria that we make clear from the outset and that conforms to international practice.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. We've also had some other professors come, for example, Harvard professor Steven Pinker, and he said in terms of research capability, Canada has the reputation now of being more woke than that of the United States. And in terms of losing scholars, and because of some of these EDI program and policies that are being put in place, that researchers do not feel welcome here, and then they look for opportunities south of the border instead of looking for research opportunities here. And how would you respond to that?
So I'd like to see the evidence that he had brought to bear with respect to the movement of researchers. I think Canada is a hugely attractive place. Positions are heavily subscribed. Our funding is heavily subscribed. Our funding rates are relatively low at 35%, sometimes 30% or even lower. So I just don't see that in the work that we do or in the results of the work that we fund.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Dr. Hebert from the Canadian Institute of Health Research. According to the EDI action in CIHR, in order to, quote, mitigate barriers faced by underrepresented groups, the first-class average, or A-plus, eligibility criterion was removed from Canada Graduate Scholarships, the doctoral program. So how is this lowering of standards increasing research excellence?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I would say in most of our programs currently, the issue is largely a very low success rate. We have exceptional research, and every single time we run a competition, we leave exceptional research on the table. So our biggest challenge is the lack of funds, and the lack of funds creates, I would suggest, very difficult competitive issues. In terms of the equity criteria, the way we're thinking this through is, one, it's important, as some of my other colleagues said. So let's just divide up what I mean, though. The first thing is equity matters in issues of health services and systems. It may matter less in terms of our approach in managing test tubes. So depending on the study and the issue of equity will be life-saving for people. As an example, the one reason we have right now why our hospitals are full is because of equity, largely. Our older adults, those who are lonely and isolated, end up and financially deprived, end up unable to go home. In fact, that's how I spent my day today. So from my perspective, equity matters because if we don't take care of some of those issues and we don't study them and understand them, depending on the studies we do, that's important. I would argue that our approach generally has been not so much cookie cutter, as you're suggesting, but rather problem focused. So depending on the issue we focus on, equity takes on a very important role.
No, I appreciate your comments and your statement about scientific discoveries will transform our lives. You also talk about limited finances, and we're talking about $4 billion is committed by the federal government to research excellence, and about 311 that goes to the research chairs. So those dollars that are being put towards this research are precious. And as this government goes through its budget ideas and this notion of spending less to invest more, they're going to be looking at all agencies with regards to their funding allocations. And so sometimes when we look at these issues such as EDI and their requirements, you're limiting the possibilities and the pool of the talent that is going to be able to do that type of hugely important research, I would suggest.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. Maybe you will get an opportunity in the second round to respond to that.
I just want to come back to the intent of this study has always been to undertake a study on the impact that various criteria for awarding federal funding have on research excellence in Canada. So in that spirit of collaboration, I was wondering if I could just quickly go to each of the agencies, if you could quickly just speak to how you are moving towards funding collaborative, interdisciplinary research. So that research that brings multiple groups together. One of my favorite examples of that is the microbiome of humans. You know, from a medical perspective, we largely looked at the 100 that could kill us. But we know if we bring in soil scientists that might be traditionally funded under NSERC, they have different tools and techniques that could be used. And certainly if you bring forward anthropologists and people that look at diets that might be funded under SRC, you can really start to have real discovery and catalysts of real discovery. So I was wondering if I each could speak to how you're really evolving to fund that interdisciplinary science.
So I won't speak to the TIPS programs because there's a number of issues, programming that we do at the broader level. For our agencies, in the 1/3 of our funds that we use strategically, the approaches that we're starting to use are network support strategies. So you bring consortia or groups together to do exactly what you just said. For example, on issues of opioids, where, you know, the discovery of new forms of therapeutics might change our approach to addiction. Pandemics is a problem for all of us, and we're bringing together folks that are interested in all kinds of different aspects of that. Engineering and chemistry. I was at the UBC the other day, and I was like flabbergasted by what I saw. These chemists were just exploring new ways of tagging molecules, of designing drugs, and all the while they were testing their new approaches in rural BC. So they are making a transformation from thinking of how they work, working with physicians and systems in a way to transform our future. So that type of stuff is happening everywhere in our country. Our approach to doing that is to basically light it up and build together consortia of interests. But it comes from our community. Most of what we do is bottom up. So if the ecosystem is ready to move in a direction, we incentivize it in all kinds of different ways. That can be our projects, it could be our network thinking, but we can't do it alone. In health and healthcare, and a lot of what we do, the provinces have a huge role to play. They have to fund the scientists, the universities, and the hospitals who we support to do their work.
And maybe I'll just quickly see if NSERC and Shirk had anything to add to that, or I can move to the next question.
Sure, I can add quickly for the discussion. So to your point, that is interdisciplinary research is often the intersection of where very interesting science happens. And so beyond the chairs at the tri-agency programming, we do, of course, collaborate across the agencies across several specific calls. We do also encourage, where there's at least two of the different disciplinary areas, we have a specific program for that. So if somebody's doing something that meets at the intersection of SHRC and CIHR, we're able to accommodate that on a smaller scale. And we have at NSERC, we have over 21 collaborations with other science-based departments and agencies. And so really wanting to connect that science that's happening in academia with the federal government.
And just to say, it was mentioned earlier, there's an investment of about $2 billion. So about a quarter of that, maybe a little more, is dedicated to interdisciplinary programming. Some of the extending back to the previous government, the Canada First Research Excellence Fund is a very large program each year, about $250 million, $300 million a year invested explicitly in interdisciplinary programming of large scale and import. We have our New Frontiers in Research Fund, which has as a mandate international research and interdisciplinary research at the cutting edge. And we work together as agencies. We developed a program in response to concerns of researchers over the years that, well, you know, how do I get funded if my work crosses agency boundaries? We've now created a program we call the Taxpayer, which is a tri-agency interdisciplinary peer review program where people can apply to any of our agencies, tick a box indicating this goes across agencies, and it gets put through a separate peer review mechanism. So we're working very hard to ensure those opportunities, in fact, are growing, not decreasing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Ms. Thompson. My apologies. What are your thoughts on DEI in the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council?
Well, rather than provide my personal thoughts, I'll provide you with some information about how we implement the policies and the practices. And so, as others have stated, we do consider having a wide variety of perspectives brought to the table and the strengthening of science through the consideration of EDI in research design. So to give a very quick example, there's been studies, for instance,
Forth by the government? Was this an initiative that the government has asked you to implement in your research council?
the priorities were identified by the government.
By the
yes.
government, and then you were asked to carry it out. Okay. So you said a variety of perspectives as part of the mandate, and so do you agree that viewpoint diversity is important then? Like a diversity of viewpoints.
I won't state if I personally agree with it, but certainly our organization is carrying out the policies.
Right. So it falls under the gambit of what you described as perspective, a variety of perspective. So there was a study that was done, which is submitted as part of this committee, as part of this study, that 88% of all Canadian faculty in universities are left-leaning, and 12% are right-leaning. Do you see an issue with that?
I won't comment on that personally.
Okay, but you just said we want to promote diversity.
We do.
Of
So we
viewpoints
do.
or diversity
so-
of perspective.
Sure, and there is evidence, which I'm not a researcher myself, but there is evidence to the idea that considerations of EDI in science results in stronger science, and we've heard about usability of science
Should
and
you
why
think-
that's important.
Do you think that if there was more representations of right-leaning views, that it wasn't 12%, it was a little higher than 12%, would that make the research better then in your case? Do you agree?
I can't comment on that, as other
But you
colleagues
just
have
said
said.
that you
It's-
want more diversity, and then now you're saying you can't comment on having more
I
diversity.
can't
is
provide my
different.
personal opinion on it.
Okay, what does your
today.
organization think if
Well,
a
as colleagues have
viewpoint-
mentioned.
All questions should be directed through the chair, and please, one person at a time, because it becomes a problem with the interpreters.
I'll rephrase the question. So if there was more right-leaning views, would that sort of meet the objectives of, do you agree that it would meet the objectives of the stated objective of your organization? for
It's always
diversity?
about the merit of the application and the excellence of the proposal.
All about merit, but then you said a diversity of viewpoints matter too. So how do you reconcile that?
Diversity of viewpoints matter in the research design and the usability of the science outcomes.
Okay, so I think we're hitting a wall here. So, my next question is for the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. So I'm looking at some of the funding of some of the research examples, and all of this research is funded by taxpayers, and all these positions are funded by taxpayers. So indirectly, it's accountable to the taxpayer, the Canadian taxpayer. And I'm seeing here there's a research project for the text complexity of German children's books for $75,000. I just want to see, how does that give value for taxpayers in Canada when we're facing a inflation crisis, a cost of living crisis, a border crisis, money that could be redirected to? How do we explain to Canadian taxpayers that is money well spent?
Well, as you said, it's public money, it's taxpayer money. And within Canada, there are diversity of viewpoints, a variety of interests. And as a federal agency, we look to fund those
German
interests.
children's books.
Madam
I
Chair?
mean, shouldn't the German government study this? Why are we studying this? How does that help Canadians?
It would be a great idea to bring the researcher here and ask the researcher
Well,
those
the
questions.
researchers are in the University of Calgary.
Yeah.
Both of them. So they're Canadians. So why are we studying, or they're based in Canada rather. Why are we studying this? How does that provide value?
First off, that the research would be of excellent quality as deemed by peers, and I think it would be a great idea to bring the researcher here and ask the researcher those questions. It's very hard to tell from a title and a short description exactly what the research is and how it would benefit
I'm going to
Canada.
start with another one. I know my time is running out. There's another one, again, also social sciences, situated apathy, the politics of post-colonial climate apathy and artistic mobilization in Sri Lanka. It was granted in 2023 to applicants in McMaster University for $20,000. That's a lot of money. And how does that help taxpayers? How do we explain to taxpayers when trust in public institutions are at an all-time low amongst Canadians that this is good value for money?
Here again, I think Canadians and Canadian researchers have a broad variety of interests, and it's our obligation to fund that broad variety of interests. And you should ask the researcher how that's important and how that. In fact,
Sorry, Mr. Ruhu, your
assists
time
Canada.
is up.
I am not surprised at all that you seem to be very much in favor of including EDI criteria in the assessment of the research projects that you look at. Just if I have a little more time, Madam Chair, Canada Research Chairs, apparently there are specific targets to ensure that women, those with disabilities, some other groups, Indigenous people, have the appropriate opportunity to move into those positions. Perhaps we could start with CIHR. Are you involved in any way with Canada Research Chairs?
Not in their evaluation, but we fund them. So the TIPS programs, the Canada Research Chairs programs, is run by my colleagues, actually, Madame Laflamme.
And this is a unique program in its formulation, as I've explained at committee before. This is mandated by a federal court order that was subject to a mediation run by the Canadian Human Rights Commission, following complaints that were made over a number of years about the fact this program was the least diverse of programming that we had funded previously. So Madame Laflamme runs this program, and she can certainly speak to that and how it operates.
Thank you. So EDI equity targets are one of the elements that are put in place based on the federal court order tied to the 2019 addendum. I'll just throw a few metrics here. When the program was launched, 14% of the chairholders were women, when in fact in academia you had more than 40% of the faculty that were women. We have that metrics because that's the only one that was gathered at the time, but what I can say is that the equity targets have contributed to ensure that the chairholders as a whole are representative of the Canadian population. But it goes far beyond the question of just ensuring that people have access to the program. There's also other measures that are put in place to ensure that the universities are providing equitable environments to ensure that the research can be done in a very good quality and environment.